In 1980, international tourism looked very different from today, but the fundamental hierarchy at the top was already recognizable. France had already established itself as the world's leading destination, drawing tens of millions of visitors annually to Paris and its countryside, while Spain, Italy, and the United States rounded out the other major global destinations of that era. Turkey and Mexico were still relatively minor players on the world tourism stage at this point, and China's international tourism industry barely existed at all, just beginning to cautiously open up to the outside world after decades of near-total isolation. Over the following 4 decades, global tourism grew almost without interruption, surviving oil crises, regional conflicts, and periodic economic downturns, as air travel became steadily cheaper and dramatically more accessible to a rapidly growing global middle class, particularly in Asia. By 2019, international tourist arrivals worldwide had climbed to nearly 1.5 billion people annually, an extraordinary figure, with France alone welcoming around 90 million visitors a year, and China had risen dramatically over just a couple of decades to become the world's 4th most popular destination. Then, in 2020, everything stopped almost overnight. The COVID-19 pandemic triggered by far the most severe collapse in the entire history of international tourism, wiping out a staggering 73% of global arrivals in a single year, as borders slammed shut almost everywhere around the world simultaneously. Every single country on this list saw catastrophic declines that year, but the recovery that followed in the years afterward was strikingly uneven from one region to the next. China, which had enforced some of the strictest and longest-lasting border closures found anywhere on the planet, saw its international tourism industry essentially disappear for several consecutive years, and even by the mid-2020s, it had still not managed to claw its way back into the global top 10 at all, a stunning fall from grace for what had recently been a genuine top 5 global destination. Europe, by sharp contrast, staged a remarkably fast and complete recovery. Spain and Turkey in particular didn't just recover their lost visitors, they actually surpassed their own pre-pandemic totals entirely by 2024, benefiting from years of pent-up travel demand and aggressive government tourism promotion campaigns. The United States recovered considerably more slowly and unevenly than its European counterparts, still sitting somewhat below its own 2019 peak even several years after the worst of the pandemic had clearly passed. And France, remarkably, emerged from the entire crisis stronger than ever before, crossing the symbolic 100 million annual visitor mark for the very first time in its long history, and then doing it again the following year, extending a global lead it has now held for more than 3 uninterrupted decades running. As global tourism finally set brand new all-time records in the mid-2020s, comfortably surpassing even its own pre-pandemic peak from 2019, one thing had become unmistakably clear to industry watchers everywhere. Some destinations emerged from the pandemic era stronger and more dominant than ever before, while others, most notably China, are still fighting their way back to where they once confidently stood.